Hello to everyone dialing in and welcome to our Future of Business and Leadership panel. I'm Mike, the organizer of this panel, and I'll be handing over to our moderator, Michael Imson, shortly. Just a note on timekeeping, we'll be ending the webinar at 1:45, at which time we'll all head over to our digital hangout, that's at ditto.tv/TCC. So without further ado, over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Mike, and hello everyone. Welcome to this webinar on the future of business and leadership, in which we'll be exploring how company executives are increasingly taking a different approach to business objectives and culture. This is an approach that places less importance on profit at all cost capitalism and more on staff well-being, on work-life balance, wider society and the natural environment. As Mike just said, my name's Michael Imson. I'm a senior content editor at Financial Times Live, which is the FT's conference division. And I'm also a chartered member of the UK's Chartered Institute for Securities and Investment. That's the CISI. And I'm the deputy chairman of the CISI's FinTech Professional Forum. Now, as you know, this webinar is part of TechCity Connect, today's all-day online event organised by Ditto. And it's been a fascinating day so far, one covering all sorts of technology, art and culture issues. Some of you logging in for this discussion will have already listened to earlier discussions, but some of you will be logging in for the first time today. Either way, we're pleased to have you here with us for what promises to be a stimulating 45 minutes. Joining me for this discussion are three prominent business leaders. First, we have Rinaldo Brutico, who is the founding president and CEO of the World Business Academy, which is based in Santa Barbara, California. The Academy is a non-profit think tank that explores the role of business in relation to moral, social and environmental issues. And Rinaldo is also a successful entrepreneur and holds senior positions in several companies. Then we have Peter Mattis, who's the CEO and founder of the Conscious Business Institute, a provider of new approaches for leadership and business culture using techniques based on neuroscience, organizational development and human behavior analysis. And the company is also based in Santa Barbara, California. And finally, we have Nadia Haakensen, who's managing director for the Africa region at Siemens Energy. The German multinational company Siemens is forming a new separate entity called Siemens Energy, which brings together everything related to power, from distributed generation and transmission to oil and gas. Nadia is normally based in Casablanca, Morocco, but for the past few weeks, she's been operating from her home country of Sweden. And she previously lived in Thailand, where she led the Siemens Energy Service Organization. Now, the format of this webinar is quite simple. First, I'll ask each of the panelists to say a little bit about themselves and what they do. Then I'll ask them a few topical questions. And listeners, you'll be able to ask them some questions too via the webinar site. So please do send them in and we'll answer some of them before we finish. There's a section on the site which explains how to send in your questions. And then we'll wrap up with some concluding remarks. So first key question is a simple one, really, self-introductions. And let's start with Rinaldo of the World Business Academy. Rinaldo, can you tell us about yourself and the organization you work for?
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to do so, and to all the attendees who are listening remotely. When I started the World Business Academy in 1986, it was a natural outgrowth of my commitment to want to see business produce some benefit for society. Our initial logo had on it, and still is to this day, business taking responsibility for the whole of society. So it says business taking responsibility for the whole. That's what we're after. Why is that so? Because our society is globally going under such enormous speed of change. And we've always had change. Change is as old as Heraclitus saying you can't step at the same time twice in the same river. The speed of change is what's helping to paralyze our nation states in a variety of ways, most recently being exhibited by the complete international breakdown of the coronavirus. So our goal at the Business Academy is to take best organization in society, business, which is designed to deal with the speed of change, and bring it to the fore and say it's no longer an option for business to take responsibility. It must do so at the peril of the loss of society itself. So the speed of change is our issue. Business is the best institution on the planet to deal with it, and it can no longer see itself as outside that arena, but actually as a component of the society out of which it arises. So for that reason, we would say that the business can and must take responsibility for these crises and provide a new form of leadership, which I believe, will be seeing coming post-COVID-19.
Okay, thank you. Very succinctly put. Peter, can you tell us about yourself and the Conscious Business Institute?
Yes, first of all, wonderful to be here. Thank you. I'm going to toot into the same horn as Ronaldo, because I believe that in this world of transformation where many people lose trust in our existing institutions, whether it's political or business, there's a huge opportunity for the most powerful system in our work, which are really businesses, to take up and to step up and take the lead, to build places where people actually belong, where they can show up fully as themselves, where they can connect, and where we can create something truly outstanding together. About 15 years ago, when I was a venture capitalist, I realized that business is not going to be sustainable anymore going forward, that people were disengaging on a higher level, and that the environment is suffering greatly, and that we need to transform business. So today, obviously, many people speak about this transformation and the need for companies to transform. What we've created at Conscious Business Institute is a system to get people there. A system that can scale across a multinational organization globally, a system that makes this airy topic of transformation, I want to say, measurable and also academically validated. So for the past years, we've worked with organizations for up to 150,000 people on 5 continents. So on a daily basis, we speak with business leaders from all areas of the world, and really look forward to sharing some of these thoughts with you today.
Thank you, Peter. And Nadia, what's your role at Siemens Energy?
Hi, Michael, and everyone listening. So I am the regional director for Africa for energy services, Siemens Energy Services, and mainly focused on distributed generation and oil and gas. And I say that, you know, my role and our role in Siemens Energy is to bring energy to people. And that's how I view what I do overall. So I'm responsible for around 250 people in Africa, where we are serving our customers with their rotating equipment, making sure that they operate as they should, critical assets, whether for industry or for making sure that energy is served to the people of the countries. Yes, that's in summary what I do. Like you mentioned, I'm from Siemens, and I'm from Sweden, and I've international experience from Asia also. And personally, I'm also a mother of 2 lovely boys who have also followed me on my journeys around the world.
Interesting. And are their schools locked down? Because I think in Sweden,
yes, they are. Yeah,
right.
they
Sweden's
are. But
taken a different approach, hasn't it, to most other countries?
Yes, it has actually. So in Sweden, normally the schools are open, since my kids are in the international school in Casablanca. So they are actually doing homeschooling from the school in Morocco right now, which is challenging.
Yeah, I'll bet. Well, look, thanks everyone for your introductory remarks. You're all involved in some fascinating work. So let's get to the heart of the subject. As I said in my intro, business leaders are taking or placing less emphasis on financial results these days and more on creating a positive impact for staff, wider society, and the natural environment. And I'd like Ronaldo to ask this question. It's actually a double question, Ronaldo. Actually, more than double. Why is this happening? Will it last, or will commercial pressures like the need to rebound from the coronavirus pandemic destroy these dreams and bring business leaders back to the old world reality? Ronaldo.
Thank you. First of all, it's an amazing point in time, because I want to put the context on this for what the Business Roundtable did just over a month ago, where it basically revoked the dogma, which has been running corporate behavior since the 70s, that the only purpose of a corporation was to improve shareholder value. And what's replaced that is something we started talking about back in the 80s, called stakeholder capitalism. So it's really critical that people realize that the business community itself has already started shifting. So the Business Roundtable, with 190 CEO signatories, announced that the idea that only providing services to enrich shareholders is no longer the legitimate purpose of business. And what they described was, which we call stakeholder capitalism, was where you take care of each of the stakeholders. Those stakeholders are not only your customers, your vendors, most importantly, your employees, and of course, your shareholders as well. And last but not least, the communities which you serve. Those are the 5 stakeholder groups. Now, that's a huge change. It's also been, this Harry's been set up by Mr. Fink's 2 annual letters to his investor group, where he's basically spoken about the need to change the mindset of business to be more socially aware of the responsibilities we have if we want the society to work. Why is it happening, you ask? Because the greed for greed's sake model, the Gordon Gekko model that we've been living off of since the Chicago School and Milton Friedman said, you know, basically greed is good, just enrich shareholders. That led from the 70s to the present day to a tremendous disequilibrium in the distribution of wealth, as everybody knows, and particularly severely so in the United States. So what had to happen was this system has gone to its logical extreme. Greed for greed's sake is destroying the planet, literally through climate change. It's destroying economic systems. It's destroying the ability of even nation state governments to react to things like the pandemic, because the lobbying that affects government at so many levels, particularly in the United States, but elsewhere as well, affects adversely the impact, literally leading to the fact that today we have what, 200 and I guess globally today we probably have 260,000 people who have already died. We'll be lucky when it stops at 1 million if it does. The statistics in virtually all the countries in Europe are quite discouraging in terms of deaths per million population. So this system has gotten to its end. Now, having accepted that it's gotten to its end, and so that companies like, for example, in the terribly depressed situation in Detroit, Michigan, where Quicken Loans has offered its call center for a month, and now they've just extended another month at a cost of $1 million to the company, so they can set up appointments for testing for the city of Detroit. According to the mayor, it's the biggest single thing that's happened to let them get their arms around the pandemic. An example of how business can take the lead. I'll end with this. I co-founded 6 years ago as a division of the Academy, and now it's its own separate nonprofit, an organization called Just Capital. And what that organization 6 years ago was dedicated to doing and is doing, and I recommend you go to justcapital.com. It is a nonprofit. And what you'll see is we're ranking the 1,000 largest public companies in America, publishing the results in Forbes magazine, and helping those companies to realize what their new responsibilities are. And what we've proven is that the companies that are most responsible are parenthetically the most profitable. I urge you all to look also at our free COVID-19 tracker, which lists the things business is doing to start taking up the cudgels because the political system clearly is failing us. So with that in mind, I urge my fellow business colleagues that are listening, and to the people who are not business leaders, push business to do what it needs to do, because no business can survive if what it's attempting to do is to prosper in the absence of the society from which it arose. You can't have it. The only people making money in Syria today are people who make munitions. The people making money in places like the rest of the world, let's just say, for the lack of a better word, are people who are trying to contribute to society through the provision of goods and services that are useful and not destructive. And I don't think it's going to go back.
Thank you, Ronaldo. Some really interesting points there. I'd like to move on to Peter. Same question for you. Why are business leaders placing less emphasis on profit and more on creating positive impacts for staff and other people?
I agree with Ronaldo that there's definitely a sea change in our world. There are a few trends which are pushing the agenda and are really showing us that our current systems of working are not sustainable anymore. They're just not working anymore. One trend is very obvious, is the emerging talent, the millennials, which is 80% driven towards purpose instead of just making money, which is an evolutionary shift in people that we can see across the world. So companies simply must change as a consequence of that. And every company that we talk to is very aware of that. And the second impact Ronaldo already mentioned is really that our way to conduct business is simply not sustainable anymore. The Business Roundtable announcement with Larry Fink, for example. So it's time to wake up. But the way we see organizations deal with these challenges are really threefold. It's not just to move away from focusing on financial results. They're actually threefold. Some organizations go back to the old principles, and we'll see that going forward as well. It's a little bit like a politician saying, make whatever country great again. It's trying to go back to the old ways, push harder, drive results, put the thumb screws on and just deliver. And this obviously doesn't work because we cannot go to the old ways in the world that's moving forward. The second way where we see most organizations and leaders at is that they're trying to deal with these challenges out there. Be more flexible, be more agile, but it's still a response to something that's happened outside of them. So these organizations will try to change, but they will always be in response. They will always be followers. They will always need to deal with something that's exposed to them, that they're exposed to. And then there's this third group of organizations, which are really here to create the wave, or we're actually, they're riding the wave. These are the Airbnbs, they're the Amazons, they're the Googles of the world, which are not asking how do we deal with these challenges out there, but they are actually creating these challenges. So in this COVID time, where we have a little bit of a hiatus and everything is up in the air, there is a choice that we all have to make as leaders and as organization. We can go back to the old ways. We can go back to more fear and control. Or we can use this time to actually create breakthroughs, to use this as a huge opportunity to show up on the different side in a different way. So if you ask me personally, I think we're hitting a wrinkle here, a very important wrinkle where we can make a choice. I see that the majority will go back to fear and survival and go to managing financial results, but I encourage everyone to watch for those who will actually do the breakthroughs, because those will be the leading organizations. Sorry, the leading organization tomorrow.
Yes, thanks, Peter. Very eloquently put. Nadia, what's your take on this?
So I definitely think that the pandemic is going to lead to a permanent shift in many ways. I think we are, as big corporations, all on sort of this offers an opportunity to really reflect around the core purpose, and this is something that we all need to embrace, both also as individuals in the world. I think the notion of sort of business to societies is nothing new. It's something that all businesses have on their agenda and must have on the agenda to be successful. But I think now we have a sort of a sense of urgency with the pandemic, and I think for any transformation to be successful, besides having a clear vision and purpose, you need an element of sense of urgency. And I think the pandemic creates this sense of urgency, which is going to actually speed things up much more when we have the possibility to really redefine ourselves. And for Siemens and Siemens Energy, our purpose is quite clear. I mean, we need to help our customers and our society to transition from a carbon-based energy world to a more sustainable energy economy. And I definitely think that this offers an opportunity to look holistically how we can create sustainable ecosystems where it's not about financial results per se, but it's actually contributing to a sustainable long-term future. And that's where, coming back to survival of the fittest will be the ones who really contribute to sustainable solutions.
I can understand that, and this, what I'm about to say now applies to what all three of you have said. I can see the benefits, the sense of that COVID has brought, the sense of urgency to change. Working from home, for instance, a lot of people will, when this is all over, work from home, which will be good for their mental well-being, I think, and be good for the transport system. But some companies are just going to have to put profit first. What about airlines and airports? The British Airways, Virgin Airways, Heathrow Airport, Gatwick Airport, they're really suffering. So when this is all over, it's all very well for them to think about the things you've just been talking about, but won't they really have to put financial results first, at least for a few years, and get back to normal?
That's a false dichotomy, Mike.
Is it?
Yeah, because if you don't know, look, there is no new normal coming out of this. If you think the airlines are going to look even a fraction like what they looked like a year and a half ago, you're wrong. And that's not going to happen. And remember, this is a bigger context in the sense that The pandemic is the warm-up. The far bigger problem that's coming, much bigger than the pandemic, for which no vaccine exists, is climate change. And look at the pressure cooker that was putting on our economic situation globally, even before the pandemic. So now what's going to happen with the airlines, like every other business, is it's going to have to retool itself, or it's going to find itself in the dustbin, the ash heap of history. If General Motors had not converted to making airplanes and tanks in 1939, it wouldn't have been alive in 1946 to make cars. And what you're going to see now is the industries and the companies that best respond to the crisis, the best managed ones, which, by the way, are the ones that obviously rank highest on the just behavior chart that we publish every year. Those companies are going to reinvent what the future does look like, which is not this future. And by the way, will no doubt not be dependent on a global system of fossil fuels. You can be sure that won't happen.
I see your point. Peter, Nadia, do you want to comment on that before we move on to the next question?
Yes, I want to say a word, because this is really about sustainability. As we come out of this crisis, many companies, like the airlines you mentioned, they will need to focus on sustainability and survival, basically. And whenever we focus on survival, it's a fear-based behavior. So when we operate from fear, we cannot thrive. It's impossible to thrive as an organization or as a team if we operate from fear. Many companies, as I mentioned, I believe, will go back to this fear-based mentality and will be all about survival. But as Ronaldo put it, they cannot go forward as an organization and thrive if they don't shift away from that quickly over time.
Yeah, I agree. I also just want to say that, I mean, the different industries need to adapt very quickly, and of course the airlines, just like Ronaldo said, are not going to look the same, and it has to be a very quick adaptation and redefinition of certain segments in the market.
And I want to pay a compliment to Nadia's company. Look at how Siemens is transitioning as fast as it can to the post-fossil fuel economy. Some of the things that Siemens is doing with the possibility of a hydrogen-powered locomotives, for example, in Germany. What they're doing for the movement of people efficiently with intercity and intra-city travel. There's so many things Siemens is doing which you wouldn't have thought 40 years ago would have been the business of Siemens in 2020, and is, and I'm guessing is a growth sector for Siemens. And Nadia's company is actually moving the needle by reinventing itself to a more sustainable model. That's what I'm saying the airlines will have to do. Not because we told them they had to, but that's the only survival mechanism available to them.
Yeah. Well, look, I do now have a specific question for Nadia. When we did our preparation for this webinar last week, you said that leadership in times of uncertainty was top of mind for you right now because of the coronavirus pandemic. You said that you normally spend a lot of time traveling and meeting people for business, and now you're housebound. So how are you managing to lead the business right now in these uncertain times, and what advice can you offer others?
Yeah, I mean, definitely it's been a sort of an anticlimax, or what do you call it, when it became a very abrupt end to my normal habits of actually traveling quite a bit to meet my teams and customers, and that was my lifestyle. So now it's very much bound to online calls and video conferences and phone calls, and it's something that I'm reflecting quite a lot about, because initially I thought, okay, this is quite temporary, just a couple of weeks, and then everything goes back to normal. But now it's of course daunting on me and many others that this is going to be the way it is for quite some time. We're not going to be able to travel, and it's going to be a lot of remote leadership. But I find that I got into it quite quickly, and the whole organization has gotten into it quite quickly. But what I feel is really important is to connect to how people are feeling, and this uncertainty around what is going to happen, and managing the business, and still having people who are in confinement and can't leave. At least me in Sweden, I can go outside. That is a challenge. That is a mental and physical strain on people that has an impact. So my big concern is, of course, to be able to reach out to people and make sure that people are feeling well through this. And there's, you know, everyone deals with uncertainty and fear differently. And as a leader, it's more than ever important that we guide people and that we can give a sense of calm and say that it's okay that we don't know, and use this opportunity of what is happening to transform ourselves. So it's a challenge. I'm still trying to figure it out, but we have to still stay connected with our people, with our teams, even if it's just a quick WhatsApp message to make sure that people are well.
Yeah, that's very true. Peter, does any of that resonate with you?
Yes, it does. It just brings to mind one of the clients that we're working with is one of the largest tech companies in the world, and they're absolutely thriving in these times. They're making so much money, they're doing so well. Plus, they have a lot of technology workers which are sitting at home right now, and they love hacking away at home because they're undisturbed. So their productivity actually goes up in that company. But what's happening below the surface is that the default mechanism for all these people at home is to go back to another screen. There's no balance anymore. There's no exchange anymore that happens over the coffee machine with their leaders in the office. That is, quote unquote, sometimes forced interaction. But all these social interactions are coming to a stop. And what this company or these leaders are realizing is that it can cause an enormous harm in the team dynamic because all the emotional, the softer factors are being kind of washed out of the day-to-day system. So I believe that today is really the days to stop managing and start leading, which means to just what Nadia said, to speak to the emotional side of business, to speak to how do people feel, to have casual conversation, to not manage content when you're in meetings and say, what do we do tomorrow and the day after, but context. How are you feeling? What do you need? How can we be there for you, etc.
So yeah, good point. I think meeting by the water cooler, that's no longer happening. But I do a lot of work for the Financial Times, and later this week we're having a virtual pub quiz. But it's not going to be the same as an actual pub quiz. Ronaldo, do you know what a pub quiz is? Do you have them in California?
A pop quiz?
Pub quiz. You sit in a pub and people ask you questions.
Yeah, we do. We have them.
Yeah. Do you have anything that Nadia just said? Does anything that resonate with your leadership?
What I would just add to what Nadia and Peter said is that see, the nature of what it is to be human is changing. We know that what we need now is a much more diverse, multi-dimensional human to be our leader. So when I've been teaching many years now, for 2 decades at the top business schools around the world, one of the things I always teach the top business students is if you don't have a daily practice like centering or meditation or something to help you connect with that place of inter-knowing, you're going to be finding yourself in a world that's so technically challenged that you're going to go off balance. And I think what Peter was talking about is that sense of losing balance without the human interaction. And one way we can do it, and go get the books by Jon Kabat-Zinn that will give you a great start on how to do that, to bring balance to yourself. Even if meditation seems like an odd word. For me, that's my daily practice for 30 years, but whatever brings you into balance. And that's part of what can help someone like Nadia and all the others of us who are dealing with the disruptions in our lives, which are enormous disruptions.
Yeah. I'd just like to go back to Peter, because you believe that businesses must transform themselves if they're to survive all this economic, technological, social, and environmental disruption that's going on at the moment. I don't just mean the COVID thing. I mean before this happened. But you're saying it's not just change that's required, but a fundamental transformation. So what sort of transformation is needed? What do you mean by that, and how should business leaders go about it?
Yeah, I think by now everybody's got the memo about transformation, unless you live under a rock. Before I answer your question, I want to spend 1 minute about transformation versus change, because I think it's worth understanding the difference. So many people speak about transformation, but what we see out there is a lot of them just try to change. If we change, it's to do something different or more or better from the same mindset. It's always incremental. It's always in the same room. It's, for example, if Hilton hotel chain asks themselves how they can improve, they build more hotels, they have better service, etc., etc. but it's not a transformation. A transformation happens from a completely different mindset when we see something that we didn't know existed or was possible before. So Airbnb coming into the room that has the thought, you don't need a single hotel to be the biggest hotel chain in the world. So transformation, that's something that you cannot order and just be transformative out there. It's something that happens when you're in the right environment. And it always opens up a new room of possibilities that you didn't know existed before. You asked what kind of transformation needed out there for organizations. One which we see makes a huge out there is to manage towards people instead of results. Now, many companies that we speak to say, yeah, we manage towards people, but basically they still manage towards results, because when the going gets rough, when there's a finance crisis, when there's COVID, they're about survival and them going back to results. We have to realize as leaders, we can only manage either towards results or towards people. If we manage towards people and then go back to results when the going gets rough, I as an employee check out because I know that I trust when it gets tough. So when we speak to leaders, some completely get it. They don't need any research. They say, yeah, if I manage towards people, the results will follow. If we speak to other people, and there you see the mindset right there that's different, is they say, yeah, that's great. We manage towards people, but we still need to manage results. That is a slight difference, but it will make all the difference in the world. So the question is that we can ask ourselves as leaders, what would it take for me as a leader or for my organization to 100% focus on people and know exactly that the results will follow? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that in everything they do as a leader, when we step up, when we make decisions, it impacts our culture differently. It impacts the way we lead meetings differently. And by that, we create a different company simply by having this different reality, this different mindset.
Yeah. And Nadia, do you have anything to say on that? Anything to add?
I would just add and reconnect with what Peter is saying on the leadership, that it requires for the transformation to happen, that it really requires a authentic leadership that also trusts and empowers the employees, and that you create a climate, a working climate and culture where the transformation can happen, where the innovation can happen. And for that to happen, you have to have a climate where people can really think freely, develop freely, and that there's not this pursuit for this just a short-term win or gain, and that there is a full transparency and trust from the leaders. And I think that is really critical for the innovation to really kick in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, thanks, Nadia. I'd like to move on to Ronaldo and the tripart mission of the World Business Academy, which I think is fascinating. If I could just explain what that is. The first mission, well, Ronaldo knows this, of course, but I'm going to ask him what he means by all of this. The first mission is to shift the consciousness of business leaders so they're no longer predators in society, but stewards of society. The second is to shift the consciousness of young people going into business so they don't see themselves as entering a jungle, but instead entering a temple where they can practice noble activities. And the third one is to shift the consciousness of the public so they put their money where their values lie, because businesses will shift their priorities in the same direction to follow the money. So Ronaldo, what do you mean by all of that?
Well, first of all, I just want to add one footnote to what Peter and Nadia said. And we have a saying in the Academy, consciousness is no substitute for competence, but competence isn't possible if you don't stay conscious. And so I always see these things as not either ors, but how do you keep this balance into the future of caring from a new level, at the same time performing at or above what historically were considered norms of adequate or superior performance. So the tripartite mission statement was an answer I gave to a question that Willis Harmon asked me on the spot the day we started the Academy. And he said, Ronaldo, if you believe business has to take the leadership to change where society's been going because the greed of business has been so destructive, how do you do that? And I said, well, you got to do three things. You got to shift the consciousness of existing business leaders so they stop thinking it's okay to be a predator. You got to get kids to realize who are coming into business, particularly our business schools, to see that they really are entering a noble profession. We have the opportunity to be the high priests of solutions. And the third thing is to get the public to realize if they really care about stuff, they got to put their money, their buying power, where the values are. Now, Just Capital is an opportunity for people to do that. So we put this list out of the 1,000 biggest public companies in America. The top 100 clearly outperform the others. They get better stock returns, better cash returns, better profits. They're better with their employees because they're better managed, as you would expect. Now, that information then translates to buying information. So you've seen, for example, in the last 2 years, Walmart, in part because of our data, has decided that they need to be a much friendlier corporation than they were because they were taking a terrible hit on reputational damage, as you know. So I think there's lots of ways we can address these questions, but most importantly, I think we have to look at stakeholder capitalism. We have to look at the idea that the purpose of business is to serve the society from which it emerges. If it's a global society, because it's a multinational, that's what it's got to serve. If it's a local business on Main Street, it's got to serve its local community. If it does that, the community will prosper, the global commerce will prosper, and the politicians will follow. Let me just end with that. If you had any doubt at how hopeless our politics has gotten us, look, Europe's headed for over 7% GDP reduction. I'll be happy if the US the next year has even close to that. It's going to be worse, I think. We're talking about a system that had Brexit as our top story and climate change just 2 months ago. And now we're even forgot about those but they haven't gone away. So my point to all of this is we must realize that the international political systems that have served us since World War II are not working now. And business, if it sees its own self-interest, the ability to make goods and services for a surplus called profit by doing something society needs, those businesses will adapt. They're by definition more sustainable, and they will be the success stories of the future. I believe that's where these three things mean, and I think that's where we're headed.
Yeah, sustainability, environmental issues, you've got some strong views on those. For instance, energy generation distribution, such as the need to transition to microgrids. And then in agriculture, you are promoting or advocating that there should be a big shift to halophytic plants that can grow in salty water to improve food production and security. So tell us why you're particularly interested in those two things.
I'll start with the second one. My good friend, and by the way, someone who was born in Britain, Hazel Henderson, whose work some of you may know, has really been actively promoting the concept of halophyte research because there are 4,000 halophytes we know of which hundreds of them are perfectly good food sources for humans. When you have a country like Bangladesh, which 15% of which has already been lost to water incursion, and you see the rising tides are inevitable, we have to begin to grow food to make the desert blue with salt water, if you will, which is literally possible, literally possible. So we're not going to have the ability to be as wasteful with dry land agriculture. We're not going to be as wasteful as water that we use in agriculture normally. We're not going to have the same amount of resources in terms of arable land, et cetera. So we need to begin to develop new food sources, not just halophytes, but many new food sources that will address this growing global population. Number two, on the energy front, which we've been researching for, now 15, 18 years in the academy, there's no question that the fossil fuel economy, which was the fuel system for the planet, we have to replace it. It's kind of like replacing your engine when you're driving 100 miles an hour down the freeway and can't stop or pull over. We can do that with hydrogen. We will do that with hydrogen. But the key building block to that is to build what are called microgrids. So those would be locally built grids, which are now building in Puerto Rico, the Caribbean islands, India, and of course in the US, are locally generated, locally used sources of electricity, which can use hydrogen fuel cells to compensate for the diurnal shift between day and night in sunlight, and for the time when wind does or does not blow. So that whole canard that you can't have renewable energy because sometimes the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine is totally false. We now can create a microgrid system which operates, and have demonstrated that here in California, at a cheaper price than a gas-powered peaker plant.
Fascinating stuff. Nadia, do you have anything to say on that, either on the specifics of the generation distribution or on what Ronaldo was saying earlier about shifting consciousness?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I fully agree with what Ronaldo is saying. I mean, I think everyone has a responsibility to serve our community. That's a must. And everyone has to ask themselves, how do we serve? Why do we do what we do? And are we serving our purpose? And also for individuals, because I think to to also be successful in transformation, it's all about people feeling a connection to the purpose of the business. And coming back to what Peter said also before about attracting a younger generation, I think every talent out there wants to live their purpose, right? Every human being wants to live their purpose. So if you're able to connect with your personal why to also the why of the company that you are working for and the society that that company is serving, then you have a perfect match. You're in harmony, you're in balance. So I think that's a must, and that's why also we, being an energy company, are focusing now on making this transition from a carbon-based energy world to a sustainable energy systems. And we're doing that in multiple ways. You know, one thing is like Ronaldo mentioned, the hydrogen economy, which is very interesting. And we're developing our technology, our gas turbines, to be able to operate with hydrogen. And this is a key focus for us now into new energy fields, making sure that we have a future energy system which is in balance. So this is really, really critical for us. And so we are very clear on what our purpose is, to serve society, and we take that responsibility.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Peter, anything to add?
Maybe just one comment as I hear you speak. I mean, obviously, we have so many solutions out there to solve the problems in our world, whether it's halophytic or hydrogen, etc. The question for me that just arises when I hear you is, can we be bold enough as business leaders to fully go into those solutions? And especially in large organizations like Siemens or other organizations, can we put what we have, the 90,000 people, the capital, the combined energy that we have inside our team behind these initiatives to move forward? I think that will be the challenge for tomorrow's organizations.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, look, we've got 3 or 4 minutes left. Just like to ask each of you one last question, which is the same for all of you. Please keep your answers succinct. This is going to give you an opportunity to quickly wrap up and summarize. We've discussed this topic at length. So, Ronaldo, first of all, could you tell us in your 45 seconds, what's the most important thing you've said in this webinar that you'd like listeners to remember?
Number one, there's 2 things. Number one, you have to achieve balance. We provide a free service at the World Business Academy called the Optimist Daily. Please sign up for it. It's free. It's 5 days a week. And what it is 5 stories you can read all together in less than 2 minutes. It'll tell you something positive happening in the world. Why? Because we believe we have to have optimism as we deal with these incredible problems. We have to look at this with a cheerful face, because optimism is a sustainable strategy and cynicism is not. Number 2, please remember, business must take the lead. It's unfortunately true that we've come to the place where business has to take responsibility for society, but it's clear that we do. And if we do it well, I think we can start to shore up our nation states, and they will once again be able to function in a more reliable, sustainable political fashion.
Thank you. Peter.
Yeah, one thing. So to everything, the hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I'm going to stick with consciousness here. So obviously we're in a critical time and where everything changes, and doing something different or more of is just not enough. The tried approach is squeezing the lemon. People are exhausted. It's just not working anymore. So maybe to remember that the most powerful element that shapes our reality, whether it's for you as an individual or for your organization, is your consciousness. That our success stops exactly growing where our consciousness has stopped growing. So the question maybe to go away with is, where do you get for yourself or for your team the growth of your consciousness? Where can you grow your consciousness?
Thank you. And Nadia.
All right, I would say that the 2 key takeaways that I want to give is, number 1, as business leader, keep staying connected to your organizations, your teams, and understand how they are feeling, how they are taking the situation of COVID. So that would be number 1, and stay human in your leadership. it's very important at this point in time. And number two, I would say, is take this time, take this opportunity that the pandemic offers to reconnect to your personal purpose and to your organization's purpose, and ask yourself clearly, how do we serve? How do we serve society?
Fascinating, thank you. Businesses to take responsibility for society, summing up what Ronaldo said. Peter, for you, the most powerful element for people and the company is your consciousness. And Nadia, keep connected in these difficult times, keep connected with your teams, stay human, and take this time to reconnect to your personal purpose and your organization's purpose. Nicely summed up. Thank you very much. All that remains for me to do now is to thank our listeners for listening and to thank our panelists for taking part. So thank you, Ronaldo Brutuco and Peter Mattis and Nadia Hackinson. Now, just one final point. On screen now, you should see the other panels and events that have been happening throughout the day. The official charity for TechCity Connect is Mind, a charity that ensures no one has to face a mental health problem alone. TechCity Connect is a free event featuring people giving up their time to share knowledge and insights. Anything you can donate would be highly appreciated and make a big difference. So please go to ditto.tv/mind. And please also visit ditto.tv/TCC straight after this webinar ends for a digital hangout with our panel, moderators, and other audience members. So thank you for listening. And again, thank you, Ronaldo, Peter, and Nadia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot. Bye.